The Transcendent Dokkan campaign was supposed to revive Dokkan. So what went wrong? How's it, everybody? Celtic Link here. We're back for another Dokkan Battle video. In today's video, we are talking about what went wrong with the Transcendent Dokkan campaign, or at least what's been going on surrounding the game in 2025 that has sort of led to the sort of less than ideal atmosphere that has been in Dokkan since the finale of this campaign. We are in the midst of, the 10-year anniversary of Dokkan, and we've seen some of the highest highs of this game, right? With celebrations like the Global Dokkan campaign and the 10-year anniversary being some of the biggest and honestly best campaigns we've had in quite some time. Very few years compared to these celebrations. And yet, this major celebration left a lot of players wanting more. So we're going to break down sort of a couple reasons for why I think that is, and why the game is sort of in the state that it's in currently, where interest in the game seems to be at an all-time low. So the first thing I want to break down is the campaigns. I think that's sort of the best way to look at this first off, right? The Transcendent Dokkan campaign this year happened in the month of September. This is a spot usually reserved for the worldwide celebration, right? Typically one of the largest celebrations in Dokkan. This year, this was replaced with the Global Dokkan campaign that actually began on what would have been Global's anniversary, beginning in July and running through essentially to the end of August. I mean, if you don't want to count the Peppy Gals portion, halfway through August, right? Halfway through August, this ran, and essentially ran straight into the Transcendent Dokkan campaign. And then previous to that, right, the last major celebration we had was the Golden Week celebration, and then prior to that, we had the 10-year anniversary. So typically, in most years, the Transcendent Dokkan campaign is the Tanabata campaign. So, right, if we think in 2023, this was the Full Power Super Saiyan 4 Goku campaign. Last year, this was the UI Goku campaign. So if we were to just take a look at these two campaigns, comparing Tanabata to Tanabata, because I know a lot of people like to compare it to Worldwide, and I don't think that's a fair comparison, even though the time frame is similar. It's better to compare it to the celebration it's meant to be. Even then, the campaign sort of falls short, though, right? When we compare what was actually in this campaign, right, there were a lot of interesting events, right, that gave players stuff to do. Like, you had this daily live or die thing for part 2, right? We had the super easy A for SDR Broly, right? We had daily missions, Purunga missions. We had, the inevitable showdown extra missions. We had the Golden Frieza Easy A. We had the new Pure Saiyan's Red Zone, Union Master, which is kind of fun, right? All out serious battles for the Dokkan Day challenges, intensifying fights, Battle Road, Clash, and we even got new missions for 2 sets of new missions for Festival Battles and Battle Hardened Formidable Foes, along with a burst mode and a new Dragon Ball story. So this is pretty typical for a campaign. However, by the end of the campaign, players were left wanting more. And the question is why? There was a lot to do here, but it left players wanting more. And I think a lot of that has to do with what was given in exchange for this, right? Despite there actually being a lot, the overall stone count for the celebration ended up being less than 500 stones. If I'm not mistaken, if my math was correct, the actual total was around 436 stones. I may be off by a couple there, but the actual total was around 436. That is actually extremely low for what should be a Tanabata campaign, right? Even the Goku campaign, despite there not actually being a whole lot of events, right? We've got 2 new stories. We had the easy A's, we had new Shadow Dragon story events, we had burst modes, and that was pretty much it, outside of a few other things, boss rush and a few easy A areas. Right, there wasn't much going on, and yet still the campaign by the end of it ended up giving out almost 500 stones, around 550 if I remember correctly, the total. And then the UI Goku campaign gave even more. Now a lot of that had to do with the fact that they had 3 major LR easy A's and a batch easy A in here, along with several burst modes, a new challenge events, and a couple other, stories and Infinite Dragon Ball histories and whatnot, and then addition stories with the God event as well and missions. So the final total for this campaign ended up being a lot more than your typical Tanabata campaign. So that actually to me means a lot for players, right? Yes, Dokkan does give a set amount every year, and they plan that out through each celebration, how much they're going to give. When you have a major celebration like this, and it gives essentially less than what it would cost for pity, it really does feel like it hurts. And the fact that this campaign is essentially an extra LR for the year that does not get to have a pity banner, right? You don't get the 2500 pity for this. You don't get even the standard Dokkan Fest pity for this. And the Part 2 LR being a Carnival LR doesn't get pity either, even though it wasn't double rates. Players feel that. And so, when you came to realize that you weren't getting as many stones, that's less stones people have to summon for these characters should they want to summon for them. And so in part, I feel like a lot of it had to do with what was available to do in the campaign. There just wasn't a whole lot because these things were so spaced out, combined with the low stone count, right? There were literally almost a week and a half of like nothing. No events, no easy A's, nothing new other than like a new daily thing here. There was literally nothing. And that's not something you want to have during a major campaign. And the other campaigns really didn't have that. Right? If you look at the pacing for some of the other campaigns, the pacing was a lot better. Like if we look at the Goku campaign, you had Goku release on the 7th, right? And then, right, just a few days into it, you had... Or I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. That's the Tanabata campaign. You had Goku releasing on the 29th, and then you had a couple of events that dropped along with him, such as you had a new support memory stage, you had a new boss rush, you had a new clash, you had a new easy A area. There were things to do that would essentially last you the week. Oh, well, the clash actually dropped a few days later. The clash dropped a few days later, which gave you extra stones, so that was something to do by the time you got to the weekend. And then you had this event, which is essentially dropping every once a week, was an extra event. It was essentially a punching bag event, so like there was something to do each new week. And this was dropping along with other content, like for example, right, by the 4th, right, you had the easy A. Within the first couple of days, you had a major easy A to go onto Goku's team and use. You had a LR EZA a couple days later. Now, to be fair, on this is the JP campaign, and the JP campaign actually ended up they EZA'd God Goku here, whereas Global did EZA this earlier on in the year. But you essentially had two major EZAs here. You had a new Dragon Ball History dropping on the 7th, which dropped along with the Tanabata banner, right? Like there was so much more going on, and it was pretty evenly paced out. The same goes for the UI Goku campaign, right? Throughout the campaign, the pacing was much better, at least on JP. Global's was way out of whack because they tried to shoehorn it into like 3 different celebrations. Like our actual UI Goku campaign didn't have anything coming with it except for like the first couple of stages of this. So, you had that going on, but like compared to here, right? Like we got Gogeta on and Frieza on the 28th of August, right up at the end of the month, and the next thing we got wasn't until wasn't until the 2nd, right? We had 2 stages here of a red zone, which really weren't that challenging. And actually, this is actually kind of a big deal. The stages of the red zone, right? Compare that to the UI Goku campaign, right? The first couple of stages of the red zone of the Supreme Magnificent Battle introduced the Evoken fight, one of the hardest fights at this time, whereas this new stage didn't really give us much to do. So you had this, and then you had nothing to do until the 10th, and that's a pretty long wait from the 28th to the 10th. That was essentially the next, almost into part 2, and even then you didn't get the final stages till the 21st, almost 2 weeks after part 2 began. So that, the pacing on the events that you wanted to play was pretty rough. And once you completed all of these, I mean, really the only thing to do was to attempt this mission here. And so that made the campaign, I think, really rough for people. So the pacing in the campaign was pretty off compared to other campaigns. So that was one major thing I feel like really set the tone for players. Second, right, is character choice. Now, a lot of people will say like character choice doesn't really matter as long as the kits are good, but I think this really makes a difference, right? Because we look at previous campaigns, right? Previous Tanabata campaigns all had one thing in common, right? It was typically some type of joined forces type unit, or a unit that had to deal with, people coming together, right? So prior to Full Power Super Saiyan 4 Goku, it was the Vegeta and Trunks. The year before that, it was Blue Kaioken Goku and Evolution Blue Vegeta. Before that, it was the Go Bros, right? It was always a joined forces unit, and then we get to Full Power Super Saiyan 4, right? It is kind of it's not a joined forces, but it is people coming together, because that's sort of the theme of Tanabata. And we'll come back to that into a minute when we talk about the actual holiday in Japan. But that was always sort of the theme of Tanabata here. And then, same thing with UI Goku, right? Everybody sort of, cheering on UI Goku in his intro animation, right? Them coming together to rally behind him, right? The theme was kind of there with him. Plus, these are 2 majorly hype transformations. And so, like, they fit the campaign, and they're pretty hype. But then we flip over to here, like, yes, there's a Gogeta, but the actual base form of this card is Frieza. And they're not really working together. Granted, both sides of the card are pretty decent. The actual card itself, right, it doesn't really fit the theme. And you're seeing Frieza more than you see Gogeta anyways, compared to some of these others. And I just don't think people were as interested in summoning for a Frieza as they would have been a Gogeta. You can definitely tell what they did here was try to, sell you a Frieza by selling you a Gogeta. And at once, like with the stone count and the campaign pacing, people felt that. And as evident, right? Like, this was probably one of the worst performing Tanabatas we've had in a while, right? We look at the revenue for this on both Global and JP. This is probably one of the worst performing campaigns we've had for Tanabata in a long time. Unfortunately, I can't go back far enough on this revenue breakdown website to tell you exactly how much the previous the previous one had made. It only goes back about 15 months. So, yeah. So that is unfortunate. But you know, the point is here, yeah, I think, yeah, the furthest I can go back is November of last year. Wait, that's less than 15 months. What the heck? I guess they're just not tracking it. I don't know. Anyways, but yeah, so I can tell you that this is significantly less, and that ought to be noted by the fact that both of these campaigns did get top grossing, whereas Gogeta and Frieza did not. So there's a lot to do with pacing, the unit choice, and the overall stones. And there's one last thing I want to talk about here in sort of what went wrong with this campaign. As hype as these two units, well, they're not hype in my opinion. They're cool, but I don't think they are as hype, especially, you know, people just aren't as interested in Frieza, unfortunately, since he's the base card. But one last thing I want to talk about is timing. I think what really hurt this campaign and has sort of put Global in the position that it is in right now is timing. I've mentioned before multiple times that this is the Tanabata campaign, and as such it's supposed to fit into a certain time frame, right? So that average 500 stone count I mentioned for a big celebration makes sense when the campaign takes place when it's supposed to take place. And I think a lot of the problems that this campaign had is its timing in relation to everything that had happened before it and where it should be. See, interest in the Tanabata campaign usually peaks around the actual Tanabata celebration in Japan, which occurs on the 7th day of the 7th month right now. The actual holiday is actually on a different day because Japan had used a different, you know, if you know your history, right? Japan had a different calendar before they adopted the Gregorian calendar. But the 7th day of the 7th month, which is why the campaign itself, right, if you look at previous campaigns, right, which is why, like, the campaign starts about a week early, right, to release the new unit, and then you have the Tanabata banner, the Starry Night banner, always drops on the 7th. And that is because of its relation to that holiday, the 7th day of the 7th month. And so, that's important, right? So that's a big day for a lot of people on the Japan side of things. Combine that with the fact that this was a banner that used to return the anniversary LRs, right? So you had a reason to come to this campaign. This was a 6 month later campaign. You had a reason to summon for the new unit. You had a reason to summon for the anniversary LRs if you missed them, or at least coin them. But that didn't happen this year. Right, this year with this banner, like, this banner was god awful, right? If we actually look at the banner here, Frieza's banner was just terrible. It only returned the Golden Week units who already lost a lot of hype due to just not being good enough. Well, Hit was good, but Blue Kaioken was and then returning, you know, Daima, Goku, and Glorio for the 1500th time this year, that really hurt the banner. There was no interest in this banner, and then not giving the second banner, the Tanabata banner, that had other units on it, that made it really rough. Combine that with the fact that even if they did do that, right, the anniversary units have more or less been power creeped by the GDC content. That made things really, really rough for Frieza's celebration and banner. Even the second banner, the Broly banner, but I mean, actually, Broly's banner wasn't too bad. For a Carnival double rates banner, it actually wasn't too bad. Returning Gotenks, putting LR SDR Broly, who was it actually for a Carnival double rates banner, it honestly wasn't that bad actually. But You had a reason to summon because Kale and Cauliflower were here on their return. STR Broly is actually pretty good, right? So you had a reason to summon if you needed a super easy A. His easy A was good. So actually Broly's banner was pretty good. So I mean, at least there was that. But again, that wasn't until halfway through the campaign. So without that enticement of the return of the anniversary LRs, because of course, as you guys know, the anniversary LRs did return on the GDC part 1 and part 2 banners, right? If we actually look here, just an example, right? Like the Omega Shenron banner, right? We had the 10th anniversary LR show up on here. So again, since they already showed up during DDC, you didn't have a reason to come back to Frieza's banner. And I think that really hurt. The timing of the campaign being in a time that it shouldn't have been really hurt the campaign. Like for global, because our anniversary in previous years is in July when the GDC would have happened, right? We wouldn't see this campaign until we usually would see this campaign either December or possibly November, but then we wouldn't see this Tanabata banner that usually comes until like December, right? It usually came around the second week of December, roughly 5 to 6 months from its release, which made sense, right? The positioning of these banners and these celebrations made sense in relation to where they came before, and of course on JP it made sense in relation to the holiday that it coincided with. But now you just have a random LR banner sitting at the end of an already major celebration, right? Again, let's not forget that GDC was extended a whole entire month, going through the month of August, right? The part EX essentially went halfway through August, and then the second half was the Peppy Gals banner, and then it rolled straight into the Transcendent Dokkan campaign. We had zero downtime. So if you were just coming off GDC, there wasn't an incentive to summon for Frieza because you had 2 weeks since you last had an opportunity to summon for what would be the best LRs in the game. So I think a lot of it had to do with timing. So, and this is what I mean. This has been this entire year. Timing has been the enemy of this year, even going back as far as the 10th anniversary, right? The 10th anniversary extended into March, which ended up releasing Daima Vegeta, but at the end of the 10th anniversary, you've already spent all your stones on everything. There's no enticement to summon for the next Dokkan Fest, which at the time was Daima Vegeta, and then rolled straight into the Saiyan Day, which normally is pretty hype, but since there was no downtime, they just rolled straight into it after the EX of anniversary. It was it wasn't as appreciated as previous attempts. Same thing goes here for GDC into Tanabata. Really, the only time we had downtime from a major celebration was the point from Saiyan Day to Golden Week, and from Golden Week to GDC. That was like the only downtime. And the worst part about those is those were really low. Stell ended up being just not good enough to justify summons on. Tao, look, I like Tao. I don't think he killed the game like others did, right? We've had other characters that are not interesting, like Lord Slug. So like having Dokkan Fest Tao is not a big deal. That's not what he killed it. It was a lot of what's gone wrong, I think, this year, especially with the Transcendent Dokkan campaign, all came down to timing. I think that pretty much hits what I was trying to say here, right? Where we are at in Dokkan right now is really due to timing. Even right now, right? Like in this baby celebration, it's essentially dead after part 2. There's nothing going on. And we're just literally for 2 weeks been waiting for the next campaign, which you should never have, even during downtime. It should not just be waiting. So a lot of it came down to timing in pacing. So, guys, that's it for the video. If you like the video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And in the comments down below, let us know, what do you think? Do you think we're onto something? I know we've talked about this topic before, about sort of what went wrong this year, and a lot of people talked about the peaks and valleys of these campaigns, but I didn't really talk about this portion of it in the video, and that I think timing really played the largest role in what went wrong this year. But let us know what you think in the comments down below. Otherwise, guys, as always, thanks for watching, and aloha.